This happened literally a month ago, back in February, when my boyfriend and I decided to try out an open relationship for a little while, for various reasons. We live separately in one of the larger cities in the north of Middle America, and there's a decently sized population of college students, like me, to keep the gay community fresh, so I was doing pretty well for myself. One night I was bored, scrolling through Grindr, looking for an easy hookup, when I got a message from a guy who was barely 800 feet away. He wasn't terrible looking, and I was a little desperate, so I agreed to go to his place. He lives, quite literally, down the street from me. I can see his building from my window. So I walked over, and he let me up and into his apartment. We made small talk, and I mentioned where I lived. Hell, I even pointed out my window from one of the windows in the stairwell. From the first, I thought there was something off about the guy. Not necessarily bad, just different. An odd twitch in his hands when he gripped the banister. The vacancy of his eyes when he smiled. I'm not so cliché as to say he felt evil or anything like that, but I wasn't exactly surprised that after we got to his apartment, the first thing he did was to tell his very pretty and friendly cat to say hello. And the second thing he did was to walk over to the kitchen counter, grab a needle, and shoot up. I hadn't even closed the door behind me. I stood there, staring, and he turned around, dropped the needle on the counter, and went, "Oh, shit man, should have asked. You cool with that?" I'm not a good Christian boy. I've broken into a church while tripping on LSD. I had sex on a headstone back in high school. But I have my standards. So I shook my head mutely, pulled my hat back on, and opened the door to leave. The guy rushed over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Yo, I'm sorry. You don't gotta go. We don't gotta fuck. Do you wanna watch Transformers 3 with me or something?" "Nope," I said bluntly, hustling away down the stairs. I bundled up my scarf against the early February chill and hurried back down to the street to my apartment. He followed me downstairs, barefoot, in pyjama pants and a t-shirt, until I stepped outside into the whipping winds. I turned back briefly to look after a moment, and he was still standing there in the doorway, watching me. I didn't have any premonitions of doom or weirdness. I grew up in Missouri. Junkies barely register as odd to me by this point. So I went home and went to bed. Now, you might have guessed it, but I'd never seen this dude around the neighbourhood before. Truthfully, I hadn't seen most of my neighbours, because my neighbourhood is an odd mixture of white-collar suburbia, college housing, and low-income housing like my Paranormal's building, all on one street. So it didn't really register when I started seeing him more. I would leave for work in the afternoon, and he'd be on the other avenue across from my building, strolling along. Or he'd cut across my building's parking lot like all the kids in the neighbourhood did. A couple of times I saw him walking across the campus mall. My apartment building is directly adjacent to my campus, but he'd always swerve to avoid me. Once or twice I'd noticed him in the grocery store I work at as a barista, but it's the only one within walking distance, and he mentioned he didn't have a car. This went on for the entire month of February. Eventually I started noticing. He'd always be walking down the street opposite my building when I left for work at my usual time, and he was only ever at the store when I was working. He'd never approach the coffee stand with the store where I work, but he'd look at me. A couple of times I noticed him enter, look at me, pretend to shop, and leave without buying anything. I was starting to feel creeped out. He hadn't done anything yet to make me feel particularly unsafe. One day, late February, I worked an early shift. When I got off, I felt a little crazy from lack of sleep, and I reached my place about 20 minutes before I usually leave for work. And on the corner of the sidewalk opposite me was the guy. He was checking his watch over and over and looking up. I did a bit of brilliant deductive analysis and followed his gaze up to my living room window. Then I looked back down at him. He looked right at me. There was a moment of tension as we stared each other in the eyes. Like I said, this guy didn't give off any evil or dark vibes. I've met people that do. No, what I saw in this guy's eyes, in his face, was much more human and much scarier. Desperation, loneliness, pain, and anger. He hurried after me. I'm 6'3" and a former sprinter, whereas he was a 5'8" junkie wearing flip-flops on ice. I made it to the first set of doors of my apartment, scanned myself in through the second, and locked them behind me. He walked through the unlocked first set, tried to open the second, tried pushing the handicap button to open them, and then gave up. "Look, man, I'm sorry," he shouted, laying a hand on the glass of the door. "Can we talk about it?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not. Leave me alone." Then I whirled on my heel and stomped over to the elevator. When I turned back, he was gone, out into the snow. I didn't see him for a couple of weeks afterward, which is nice, because my boyfriend likes to walk down the street past the dude's apartment when he stays over and needs to go smoke. One night, my boyfriend was over at my place. He'd just gone out to smoke before he went to bed, and he mentioned that he wanted me to come with him the next time he went out. "Why?" I asked, pulling him in close to me while we shivered. "It's dark and cold and I get paranoid out there sometimes," he mumbled into my chest. "There's this creepy dude that sometimes stands on the corner across the way and just stares at the building. One time he asked me for a cig, and I told him I didn't have one when I had one literally in my hand." He laughed, kissed my chin and passed out. I laid there awake, troubled. When I was sure my boyfriend was deeply asleep, meaning about 5 minutes after it passed, I extricated myself and went to the window. It was a cold, clear night. I could see across the street, under the orange glow of the streetlight, was the guy. I couldn't make him out clearly, but when he saw me, he waved. I flicked them off and closed the blinds. I didn't feel like I should tell my boyfriend, because he was either going to immediately go to the police, which I hate doing, or he'd try and defend me. And while I love him with my entire heart, I don't want to watch a fight between a junkie stalker and my underweight, nicotine-addicted boyfriend. So I kept it to myself, and still haven't told him. But I did start accompanying him when he went out to smoke. The guy was usually outside. Sometimes he'd follow us a bit before ducking away down a side street. Sometimes he'd watch from a distance. Sometimes he'd be up in his apartment. My boyfriend never noticed. I kept my composure, and nothing happened. One night, though, we went out so my boyfriend could smoke, like normal. When we'd reached the end of the street and turned around, the stalker was behind us, about 50 feet back. I turned my head to check, and there he was. He waved at me again, and something told me I had to get back inside. "Hey babe," I said quietly to my boyfriend. "Let's get back inside, yeah? I'm cold." "Oh, baby," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Okay, I'm almost done anyway." We walked back to the apartment building, and without turning, I knew that the stalker was behind us the entire time. I kept my hand intertwined with my boyfriend's, and kept up the casual conversation we'd been having about how I hate geese. We got back up to my apartment, and he got changed for bed while I grabbed some water. So I've never lived in an apartment before, and I don't know if it's odd or not, but this building has a wired telephone in each unit that rings when someone wants lets in. Ours never rings unless it's Uber Eats, so my boyfriend was surprised when it started ringing late at night, when neither of us had ordered anything. "Probably just some asshole playing a prank," I said, unhooking the phone from the wall and putting it in the kitchen cabinet. He accepted that without a struggle, and we laid down in bed. After he was soundly out, I got up, got dressed, grabbed a couple things, and headed downstairs in my thick winter coat. Sure enough, my fanboy was out there, in the parking lot. He waved at me and jogged over, smiling broadly. "Hey man." "What do you want?" I said flatly. Look, man, I feel like we ended things awkwardly last time, and I just wanted to talk to you, he said. So you stalked me? What? He started to look angrier, his brows furrowing. Nah, man, I didn't stalk you. I just wanted to know when I could talk to you, but you always avoid me. Now you're walking around out here with that skinny little bitch boy trying to rub it in my face, and I don't fucking appreciate that. Look, man, he said, smiling again, stepping closer. You want to go talk about this back at my place? Ditch the white boy and come hang out with me tonight? Please? I won't shoot up or nothing this time. He took another step closer to me. I saw, in his right hand, a dully gleaming piece of metal, a folded up switchblade. He smiled at me, and I stepped back, shaking my head. His smile drained away into a deep scowl. Bitch, I'm done asking. You're going to come over to my place now and finish what we started. He growled, unfolding the knife and pointing at me. This dude was 5'8", tops, and skinny. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds, and regularly lift weights. Also, I had a 12-inch kitchen knife, which I drew from my coat pocket and levelled at his throat. He looked at my knife, then back at his, and smiled again. Bro, I was just playing. We can just talk right here, bro. Leave me and my boyfriend alone, I said, or I will cut your face off and eat it. What the fuck? I spent 8 years in juvie for stabbing a kid in school, I lied. He backed up, putting the knife back in his pocket. I took a step closer, holding my knife level. He backed away quickly, almost falling on the ice, until he was full on sprinting back to his place, and I was chasing him down with my knife, until he crossed the street and I stopped, slid the knife in my pocket and watched him run back to his building. Then I went back up to my bedroom, told my boyfriend I'd just had to go pee, and fell asleep. So, nameless horny junkie, let's not meet again, or I'll eat your face. So I've been living alone in a foreign country for a year already. The last months I've been taking ferry to move, because the metro is usually crowded, stressful, and in COVID times is a nope for me. So ferry is always the best option. At least, this was my thought until this week. On Monday, a random guy, probably 30 to 35, sat next to me in the ferry and tried to talk. I'm not good with the language yet, so I let him understand I didn't know what he was saying. He kept talking and showing me his phone. He'd just taken a picture of me. I asked him to delete it, but he didn't understand, so I ignored him to make him stop. He was irrelevant at the moment. On Tuesday, I noticed the guy was in the ferry again. But this time he greeted me and called me by my name, which of course surprised me since I didn't know him. He sat next to me and kept talking non-stop, but this time he went over familiar and tried to hug me. For my luck, a woman noticed it and sat between him and me, pretending to be my friend. On Wednesday, I used the metro instead of the ferry, so it was normal. On Thursday, I took the ferry, and this guy was there again. This time he sat far away. When the ferry reached the other side, I noticed the guy was following me, so I changed route and went to a bus stop which is just next to the ferry port. As it was late night, there wasn't so much people around. I was scared. So I sat in the bus stop, and there was a couple waiting in there, so I felt safe. But the stalker came, and sat next to me and suddenly held my arm while saying, "Come, come, come," and trying to take me with him. At this moment, I just held his arm tight and asked help. The couple next to me called police, and I did the report. I mentioned that on Monday he was taking pictures of me, and he might be doing the same with other girls. The police asked for his phone, and for my surprise, he handed it to them with no problems. Like he was sure nothing was going to happen to him. When police checked his phone, they found pictures of me, but not just from Monday. This guy had been taking pictures of me for months, Months. Not just in the ferry, but also in the parking site, even outside my home. Besides my pictures, they found pictures of a different girl, which I believe he was following for months as well. The worst thing about this whole situation is that I filed the report to the police, but they couldn't do anything because the guy hadn't hurt me. So right now, I'm looking for a place to move. Anyway, be careful all of you. These creeps can be everywhere. I despise the media. Driven, artificially engineered lies they tell the masses. And people believe them without question. If your child was murdered, would you ask questions? Or would you just believe the suspects who say, I didn't do it? I'm sick of it all. I don't have a political preference other than isolation. So, I left and decided to make my home the most deadly, hostile place on Earth. Chernobyl. The Mutants of Pripyat. Diary entry, November 3rd. I'm evidence to the contrary. I've lived in Pripyat for over a year, not more than a quarter of a mile from the rotting stone sarcophagus which was Reactor 4, the nuclear reactor which caused the evacuation of Chernobyl. I live right in the heart of it. I fish a lot, and hunt. I eat mostly catfish. You wouldn't believe how many of them exist in the Pripyat. I'd assume because there was no fishing of any sort here, there's such an abundance of them. I've heard stories that exposure to the radiation here will make you blind, develop tumours, and turn you into a mutant. All I've seen of myself is an increase in height, by almost 3 inches, at age 29. The guards are aware I'm here, and they've essentially quarantined me in. I might never leave. They say it wouldn't be safe for another 20,000 years. I say it's perfectly healthy to stay here now. Now that winter is on the horizon, however, I plan on moving on. I've not told you that my city was burned to the ground by extremist left-wing political groups. They took over my apartment complex. They raped and killed my fiancée and beat me over the head with a glass bottle until it shattered, and I played dead. Do I want to live under a Stalinist totalitarian regime? Or should I simply just move out to either Ukraine or Russia, which was once home to the former? Well, the reasons I moved here were not really political. I shot and killed a man. I was aiming for a rioter. My aim wasn't so great. Instead, I shot a police officer right through the temple. I quickly beat down a protester and put the gun in his hand. They arrested him. He's going to prison for life. I say good riddance. I'm a loner now. I always was, really. I always had to either get inebriated or force myself to act fake in the face of social gatherings. But enough about me. I found someone else living here. A very pale person, almost luminescent white. Thin, most likely a female, and extremely sick. She limps around and sleeps in the old polar bear enclosure at Chernobyl Zoo. Tonight is the night I confront her. She's always near my camp, toying with me. I sleep in a closet in Sportive Naya Secondary School, number 5 of 5. I swear I hear footsteps at night inside. I typically have assumed it was a guard, but when I creep out into the white linoleum floored halls, there are no flashlights. About 6 months ago I heard some commotion out there, and I grew the balls to take a look. An entire pack of wolves lingered inside of the lunchroom, all congregating in one spot. The next day, I found the remains of a lynx, right in between some tables. Think any of the Belarusian students would have imagined a pack of wolves would be devouring an animal right where they were eating sauerkraut? The footsteps have been recurring almost nightly now, I must have a visitor. But nobody except riot police in gas masks is supposed to patrol this city. The only other visitor I can think of tiptoeing around my home is the glowing woman. I say glowing because I've spotted her once at night. I had nothing more to do than swing on a playground swing a few weeks back one night. I heard a rustling off in the distance and observed movement inside of a room, drenched row of leafless bushes. And there she was, one half of her body standing up straight, the other limp, leering over. I ground to a halt in the moment, and we stayed there for minutes, just staring at each other. She had black hair, so long that it very easily rested in the ground. Her facial features were quite jarring, deep eye sockets and sharp cheekbones. But her skin lit up like one of those UV lights deactivates used on CSI. I'd never seen anything like it. She began to limp towards me like the hunchback of Notre Dame, and then my instincts forced me to jump up to my feet. At first, I thought she was sneezing over and over again. When I understood the sounds to be more of a snarling, I turned and ran so hard and fast, I hyperextended my knee and fell face first into some gravel. I've seen her around ever since, but I'm sure to keep my distance. It was only 2 hours ago, which is what prompted me to start keeping a journal, thanks to a discarded notebook and pencil. I heard footsteps accompanied by that same gurgling and snarling. She's here, in the building. I'm not sure if she's exploring or looking for me. God, I pray this mutant doesn't find me. Sleeping will be difficult for the next few nights. Something in me. It's not good. Diary, November 9th. I caught her stalking me through the pitch dark linoleum halls, chasing me into a bathroom. I could hear her distinct groan on the other side of the door. Suddenly, I heard the door crack open, and someone entered. That scratchy growling subsided to heaving, and as I perched myself on the toilet, a glowing limb extended its grasp under the stall and held out its hand. I opened the stall door and saw the phosphorescent woman before me. I didn't feel threatened anymore. Diary, November 11th. I've been waking up sick. Constant nosebleeds, choking on my own blood. I'm getting weaker. I believe now the sickness is getting to me, and I'm slowly succumbing to the radiation. I made a huge misstep coming here. I should have known. Or maybe I wanted to die alone in isolation. Last night I came home after foraging for food. I approached 2 guards, and all they could spare was a granola bar, and the other poked me with the butt of his rifle, told me to stay back. He then castigated the other guard for helping me, explaining to him I was clearly sick, and that if I come back, shoot him. It hit me like an axe to the head. I'm going to starve, or die of illness. The fish aren't even biting anymore. It's about to be winter. They're all asleep at the bottom of the river. Desperate times. I decided on the way back to make a small leave of desperation. I found my scrap pile and chain smoked for a good hour in the barren, icy frontier. After the evacuation, as everyone knows, all was left as is. Walking past cemented, empty pools with brackish water, puddles surrounded by flake plastic palm trees, ridden with icicles, is an eerie sight. I felt like I can still hear children laughing, doing cannonballs off the cruddy diving board. The grass is still tall and dead this time of year. So much uneven terrain, a vast expanse of split, stifled, and rotting concrete with years of growth in every direction. To the left are the cooling towers of the disaster site, so huge yet so far away, beyond treacherous terrain of rock piles and metal posts with warning signs of nuclear radiation. It wasn't long before I could taste the metal dripping down the back of my throat. Walking back to the school, I came upon a line of lampposts. I felt lightheaded and had to lean against one. Just then I sneezed. When I picked my head up, I saw a splatter of dark red dribbling down the side of it. Blood aerosol, like someone's brains had been blown out by a 9mm. I'm becoming a monster. When I got back to the room, someone was lying next to my mattress, wrapped in an orange sleeping bag. It was my luminescent, kind friend. I could see the bright green skin of her cheek nestled inside of her bag. I was careful not to wake her, but I did when I dropped my flashlight. We stayed up all night. She would hardly speak. She pulled out a deck of cards and we played Go Fish. It was very hopeful seeing her smile and having a companion. She held my hand the entire time. Dare I say, she tickled my palm with her thin porcelain fingers. I felt the fleeting notion of love. Why, so quickly, am I feeling this way? Maybe it's my protective instinct. She was a tired, malformed soul who needed my warm embrace. At one point, she gazed up at me with that beautiful face, and we just looked into each other's eyes. Then, we both bashfully looked away, and I saw her smile. We played for hours, and then she cuddled up against me, and I wrapped us both in my blankets. She was shivering, so I hugged her tightly. She kissed me on the cheek. I'm so glad I have her, and I feel awful describing her previously as a monster. Before we both fell asleep, she muttered a whisper, the words, "I'm so hungry." November 12th. This will be my last entry. I'm dying. I'm in unrelenting physical pain. I awoke restrained. My hands and ankles tied up with dirty, coarse rope. My new friend exposed me to something I now regret. I had awakened with a throbbing, searing, stabbing pain in my stomach, and most of my torso was drenched in blood. I turned and saw her on her knees, back facing me. I was covered in a blanket, but the blood smeared and thickened all over the floors. I called out to her in a faint gasp. She turned and looked at me with the most angry, evil look I'd ever seen. She was holding some type of meat. It was my liver. I asked her, "Why did you do this to me?" She grabbed my blood-splattered diary and pointed to a phrase from one of my previous entries. It reads, "I've been seeing this person, this presence, a glowing woman, skin lit up green like a UV light. She walks crooked and bent like a hunchback. I've got no other description for her other than that of mutant." Then she pointed squarely at one phrase, "The mutants of Pripyat." I'm now untied, but can no longer move. She told me to write one last entry while I can. I can hardly muster the strength to hold up this book and write. I keep dropping it in my own blood. I can't do this anymore. It was all a mistake. These are the last words I write. Her head is buried in the hole in my stomach. I can feel her gnawing at my guts, making those hissing and grunting noises I was once so terrified of. I can't see anymore. Diary, November 13th, by The Mutant. I finished off the author's innards. I was in a perpetual state of starvation, but now I have limbs, a head and a torso to keep me full at least for just a little while. Those guards, those men, they've never touched me. I simply had to find a way to draw the author into my trustworthy grasp when I say they'd raped me. I'm a feeder, not a mutant. Everything here is a feeder. The fish, the wolves, the bears, the crow. I was told once that I had cerebral palsy. I suppose, considering my deformity, that might be true. But it's superfluous right now. This is the wild, and I'm a wild animal, not a human. Anyone who walks this place beyond the rubble and frosty breaths need fear me. The woman who shimmers. Going to sleep now. End of diary entry number 1. My name is Diane. The following story was told to me by an acquaintance I knew years ago in Utah, named Noah, originally from Sweden. He worked as an environmental researcher for 35 years. The following story is paraphrased as best as I can remember it. I worked in a research outpost in Antarctica back in 1993. I haven't been back. Something is being deliberately hidden. We were a research team studying glacial carving related to climate change and emissions. It was to be a 3-month excursion, beginning at the cusp of their November summer through February. We were just under 4 weeks in, staying in essentially a steel-walled cabin fitted with 4 cots all in one tiny living area. Days were spent mostly in observation of genuinely gorgeous, virgin expanses of tundra being eaten and swallowed up by the earth into holes dozens of miles wide, all in one shot. Nature is both beautiful and intimidating in equal measure by its unpredictability, especially in uncharted corners where no man has ever stepped. At night, though, it was much less majestic. Sardines packed into a little tin full of wires and cords, but no mosquitoes or ants in sight. That was always nice. It was a Thursday night, not a particularly eventful day. We started kicking back the drinks right around dusk. And by 9 p.m, we were inebriated, falling down laughing. I remember one particular anecdote about a guy named Mel's wife's birthmark that looks like Hitler. Don't ask. But then, it happened. You hear that? Asked another researcher named Anthony. He reached across the desk to turn down the radio. Hear what? We asked collectively. Radio silence for about 30 seconds. I think when it first sounded out, we were in such disbelief that none of us conceded. Wolves, howling faintly in the distance. But wolves don't live in Antarctica. Nothing lives in Antarctica. Not even Inuits with sled dogs. The air slowly regressed to thick, palpable, collective dread when it rang out again, only closer. We had a window, and nothing could be seen but a desert, the horizon, and a purple haze emanated by a dying sun. Howling again, nearer, and again. Multiple howls ringing out at once. An entire pack of phantom canines in unbelievable terrain. No, that's got to be a whale. Dennis reared his stare toward the floor as the words left his breath. We were more than 5 miles from the coast, and the ice below was at least 1,000 meters deep. Not even icequake could be audible where we were at. We all sat in an eerie dread, induced silence for minutes. I felt a charge in my belly. Electric anxiety. We all did. I could see it in their faces. Open the window, I said. It's fucking -3 degrees. We'll have icicles hanging off our... And then, Dennis's sentence faded out to silence, and the howls started again. Fucking wolves, in negative temperatures. Howls once again, roaring for nearly a minute, while I stared at wide-eyed terror in the others' faces. He shut the window as quickly as he opened it, and none of us protested. It just went on and on, for a period of maybe 55 minutes, to be almost exact. I know, because I'd basically disassociated from the nightmarish reality of the situation by leering at the digital clock next to Mel's cot. Finally, the howls faded out to nothing, and it was gone. The next morning we phoned in for a helicopter. Anthony had recorded the entire thing. I don't know which was more terrifying, the ghostly baying in the distance or static, silent fear. We went out as a team the next day and trekked a mile in each direction. No fresh fallen snow, no wolf pits, no paw prints. The chopper from a research station 40 miles off swept the entire area for about 10 miles in every direction and found nothing but tundra. In the end, I understand the story is a bit anticlimactic. No, our station didn't get ripped apart by rapacious werewolves or attacked by a monster that crawled out of the carved holes in the desert. But something unholy was out there that night. We didn't bother to listen the rest of the trip, but it was there. Something is out there in the deserts of Antarctica, around the coordinates of 7750 south, 16640 east. 2.5 years later, our research station was shut down by the Swedish government for unknown reasons. Probably technical issues, but then again, maybe not. I don't know. But that one particular hour was the most frightening thing I've ever faced, and I nearly drowned as a child. All the other stations remain until this day. Wolves don't live on the continent of Antarctica, but they were there that night.